It is the Anfield Wrap in association with RedsBet. Neil Atkinson, Glenn Price, Steve Graves and Adam Smith are the three people I have with me today to talk about Liverpool's 1-0 victory over Brighton and Hove Albion. We are supported by RedsBet, as I said a minute or two ago. RedsBet are a gambling company where they put 50% of profits back into fan-related causes and initiatives. If you do gamble, consider gambling with them. If not, please be gambleaware.org, and in general, just be gambleaware.org. And if it's not for you, that's absolutely fine. I'll start with Steve Graves. Steve, Liverpool faced Brighton this weekend, and it felt like we sort of ever so slightly delighted to get out with the win. You'll take any win at any stage of the season if we're honest about it. Looking back at the game now, it feels like we ever so slightly sort of exceeded to Brighton's version of reality. That Brighton sort of got what they wanted in a strange sense, certainly up to 75. They were still in the game. There was still only one goal in it. And it became the sort of match where everyone just sort of accepts if Liverpool win, they're going to win 1-0.
I think that's true. I think it was much less of an if Liverpool win than a when Liverpool win. I didn't feel like Brighton, whether they're able to or even wanted to, sort of laid siege to Liverpool late on in the way that you've sort of seen those games go before. And that, I suppose, is the significant difference, and maybe the difference in the Liverpool team and in the way teams are going to approach us this season. We talked about it before, teams taking a 1-0 or a 2-0 at Anfield and feeling like, well, it doesn't derail your season, it doesn't ruin your next performance, it doesn't sort of give you any hangover, so you'd be relatively content with that if you're Brighton. And I think you feel like their equaliser could only really have come by some massive slice of fortune or some massive error from Liverpool, which is always possible and can always happen, and you give yourself a puncher's chance, then maybe that's a perfectly reasonable way for them to approach the game. It's not a performance you're gonna look back on, even 2 or 3 games on and be amazingly enthused about as a Liverpool fan. But it is the kind of performance that for quite a long time has felt quite rare, maybe slightly unfairly, but I think certainly in the first couple of seasons under Klopp were quite rare. And you'd see a lot of 2-2s or mad games at home where we'd get back into them, thinking of the Swansea game which was just everything wrong. There was an awful lot right here if your intention is to win a game and get 3 points, and we sort of need to start treating games. I think some of this is partly to do with the fixture lists and the way they've fallen, and no sort of big game before the break, but these games just aren't, they're of a piece. And we talked about, we need 10 points, we'd be happy with that from these 4 games. Well, we're virtually there with that. Really good chance of getting 12. I don't think the manager, if you look at the way he's literally played the same team in all of them, he's almost treating them as one 4-piece set, I think, or certainly these 3. We'll see what happens with Leicester.
I'm intrigued by the manager's sort of post-match comments, Adam, and he has made the 3 unchanged sort of selections. But the one thing you can say is, and it's a phrase he used a lot last season, used a lot the year before, is you can have a conversation about rhythm. And Liverpool looked a bit out of rhythm, and it strikes me that it's easy for us, and the manager even mentioned what Guardiola had said. It's easy for us to sort of think, well, yeah, they should just hit the ground running. I sort of wonder what they're doing in training at the minute during the week, because it may well be that this is almost like we're trying to do 2 things simultaneously. One, extend pre-season on the one hand, and on the other hand, we're trying to say, well, we also need to get the 10 to 12 points that Steve just mentioned as well. And I just think that they all looked a little, maybe this Liverpool side could sort of do with a bit of 2 games a week at the minute, because it looked like they'd sort of forgotten bits and pieces of what they wanted to do.
He said something in the post-match, didn't he, about that these are the most important sessions that he's got at the moment, these games, which is indicative of it being a continuation of a pre-season of sorts, that because of the World Cup, he didn't get the full length of time, that he's still working them harder than he would maybe in a normal season if he'd have had a full pre-season in front of them. He's maybe working them harder in training than he would have otherwise. And I think that's showing in certain players. I thought in the West Ham match, for example, we won it 4-0, but I thought Firmino looked like he'd done an extra training session compared to everybody else. And it makes complete sense because he was the one that had the least pre-season because of his World Cup exploits, or one of the ones that had the least pre-season. But he looked really leggy to me. And I wonder, when I saw the unchanged side again, I did briefly think, I wonder whether having somebody else in might just have given the rest of the players something else to think about. So they've been playing with each other now 3 games in a row, and it has got that, you would logically you would think that would give them more rhythm, but somehow it seemed to not have done. And I wonder whether if he'd thrown something, like a Shaqiri in or something like that, or even brought Henderson back in, whether that might have just jazzed things up a bit to give them a little bit more to think about during the game.
It strikes me you probably get the most out of the manager post-match after a game like this where things haven't been quite right, but we've won. So he's able to be quite honest and open, Glenn, about what he feels hasn't been quite right because we've won. He's not going to be defensive. He's not going to defend anyone. He can look at the lads and he can say, well, they've all worked hard and we got the 3 points. But he was about as emphatically critical of his Liverpool side that maybe certainly I can remember him being after a game. And it wasn't dissimilar after Crystal Palace either when he said he expected 70% more out of his fullbacks. But again, we'd won the game.
Yeah, he was talking about the change he made after, at half-time, and I think it's quite noticeable that from watching the game back that Liverpool sort of had two holding midfielders at times in the first half, and for the majority of it, they were in absolute control, and Brighton didn't get a sniff. But I think what the manager was worried about is that getting that second goal, and he perhaps thought that wasn't coming. But Liverpool played really well in the first half. But in the second half, they did lose that control because he blamed it on, whether his instructions weren't good enough or clear enough, and like I said, his English wasn't perhaps to the level that was needed. But they really did lose a bit of control in that second half, and he was critical of that. And I think he was right actually, because that second half sort of is exactly what Brighton were waiting for, and Liverpool really did need to keep in control. And I think they only sort of regained it until Henderson came on in the 63rd minute. But yeah, he was critical after it, and I thought that was the main takeaway of the entire press conference. I know people are lapping up the Alisson comments and how it's all great and all that, but I think he was critical of himself just as much as of his players and how he didn't get the message he wanted to across clearly enough.
The other thing that is difficult though, as I started off with Steve in these games though, is I was wondering a little bit. It reminded me, and again, it's something deeper into another season. I remember 08-09, and we go and we win at Chelsea, and then the next week, midweek, we got Portsmouth at home, and everyone gets really edgy as the game wears on. But Liverpool win at 1-0. But everyone in the ground's really edgy. Now, I don't think the ground was particularly edgy, but I do think that if you are those players, you do know that City have dropped points, and while it is only the third game of the season, you can imagine that those players are thinking to themselves, we can't let them off the hook. For us to have a chance this year, we cannot let them. I said on another show, they've dropped 1/7 of the points they dropped last season in total in one afternoon, and that shows you that Liverpool and these players are not stupid. They know that, don't they, before the ball's kicked?
And I think they knew that from the start, because within the first 15 minutes, Liverpool could have been like 3-0 up. Mane has that really good chance that he should score. Firmino is denied by a brilliant save from Ryan, and
which has a good credit, it deserves.
Yeah,
that save.
It's a really, really good save. And then obviously Trent hits the bar, although Ryan probably should save that anyway. But we always talk about this Liverpool side, they play in spurts at times, and maybe that's not going to be the case so often as they get more control of games, which we're seeing under Klopp now. But I've seen Liverpool in the past. Liverpool could easily have been 3-0 up inside 15 minutes, and then we'd all be talking about what a controlled display it was and how devastating they are in the attack. It was just, and the manager's since spoken, he does a load of interviews after the game, and one of them he was saying he was just ruining the missed chances in the first half, and I think he's quite right to be fair, because had any, another one of those goals go in, we'd be having a different conversation about just how ruthless this Liverpool side are.
It's an interesting point about this sort of being two notes to Liverpool, and then there's the 5-minute burst that sweeps a Hoffenheim away, and that kind of thing, or the things that we did at City wrong, or when you just suddenly it seems unstoppable and inevitable, and then those periods, which are probably the bulk of most games, where that's not happening. And I suppose you can either try and make the great spells last longer, which I'm sure we'd like to do, but also making the spells that are inevitable, that are a bit quieter, making us much better in them. And I think in these three games, we look much better in them. We look much better and more at peace with ourselves, I think, in terms of doing that. And maybe that's one thing with the continuity of selection that he's looking to get people into that kind of rhythm and getting used to that a little bit. I think he's sort of talking about it, the game from a position of strength, as Neil said, and that seems like good management to me, to be both self-critical and also critical. I think he's probably most critical of his best players, and I think that is the thing, that the position you'd quite like to be in, is to be able, on the training ground to be able to say to Salah, Firmino, Mane, I need more from you because you know it's there. I think you've got players like Joe Gomez, who I think will be a fantastic player, but is at the minute performing as well as he ever has in his career. So I think you don't really want to be in a position where you're having to think about telling him that he's somehow let us down. And I think that his performance, one of the absolute standouts in the game, which is, it feels like it's you sort of say it feels perfect for the manager. Perfect for the manager will be that we won 6 or 7-0. But I think in terms of the way a 1-0 win could play out, I think that there's loads there to take away and go away on the training ground, and you can sort of guard against complacency while having won 3 games.
Well, you got 9 points.
Which is pretty good.
You've got 9 points on the board, but everyone can have a good long think about things.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And as part of that, Adam, Steve said before, he mentioned the front 3, and I do think that, again, you do wonder about where they're up to in terms of fitness, in terms of balance. I think that for me, we can almost have a separate conversation about. I thought Mane was the best of the 3 of them in the previous 2 games, but he was comically poor at times. It was a real sort of being able to say bad day at the office performance from him, where nothing worked. He had 10 minutes, but I think he kicked it into touch 3 times. I was amazed. And Salah, again, like against Palace, you get to say he doesn't play well, but Liverpool will win 1-0 and Salah scores the goal.
Yeah. And after last season, we should all be licking our lips a little bit, really, because we've scored they're now 7 goals in 3 games, and the front 3 have all been pretty poor, apart from Mane for 2 of them. But then even he's had his dreadful game as well. So it's actually quite exciting about what's going to happen when the front 3 clicks like it did last season, because it will be a when. It is about, at the moment, sort of coming back. They've all had their own exploits in the summer. They've all had their own World Cup journey, and in Salah's place, his own journey in general, and there's still bits and bobs going off with the Egyptian FA at the moment and things, isn't there? So there's still stuff going on there that's probably playing on his mind a little bit. So they've all got their own things to be thinking about once they're back in the rhythm of the Premier League, and once they've clicked again and working with the midfield, because of course it is the midfield that fed them a lot of the time. Whilst they did the magic last season, if you like, it was often the midfield that was sort of feeding them the balls. So now they've got a new midfielder in Keita who's got his own things, settling into the country and all that. So it is exciting. And if I was a Premier League defender, I'd be watching this and thinking, I don't want to play them, please, because they're going to be really good soon.
Because they're on about Brighton's weekend.
Exactly. So, even the likes of Leicester, some of the defenders might be going into thinking, this is good, because none of them are playing that well. But there'll be some of them thinking, they're going to click against us, aren't they? They're going to put 5 past us or something. There will be that thought process going on. So it is exciting, but it is just funny that Mane's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant the first 2 games, and then dire in the third one. And I think it's just he knows loads of people, put him in the fantasy football teams to wind a few people up, because it was like, as you say, he was just booting it out. It wasn't even, some of them I was like, I don't even know what you were thinking you were doing there. Like, it wasn't even like he's gone, I can see there's a pass and there was a player, but the players, he just booted it and it's gone out to play. But he had that. He's had that in previous seasons as well. He's had it early doors. He's had a few games where you think, what's he up to there? He's just kicked it out, or he's played a pass where you think he's playing it back to a midfielder or a defender, and there's no midfielder or defender there, and he just kicks it to the opposition player. Like, he does have that in his locker. And so, it was more, because we won, you can look back retrospectively and say it was more amusing than anything else.
There's something around the worry. I'm not worried about Mane at all. I still expect him to be genuinely challenging for Player of the Year. I'm not worried about Salah in the slightest. If I say I'm worried about Firmino, would perhaps phrase it the wrong way. I just wonder whether or not we're going to have a lot of this season talking about opposition sides making his life practically impossible and making it really hard for Liverpool to get the ball to him even. That's what we saw that against Palace, and I think you see it with Brighton as well. The 3 centre-mids as jobs, they're there to challenge Liverpool's midfielders, but you get the impression at times that they're just to stop passing lanes into Firmino. They're there to make it hard for Liverpool to get him the ball.
Yeah, there's the Brazil thing's well documented, and there's some of that in there, I think. I thought there was times when he was certainly brighter than West Ham, and certainly my problem with Palace wasn't really sure where he was playing all the time. I think he was getting dragged into areas that he didn't really want to be in, and he's a striker who actually thrives in lots of areas like that. But I think there were times when it was almost to extremes. He was sort of bobbing around at number 6 at times, and I think it fitted together quite well. I think there was times, certainly in the first half, not least the goal, but there were times when it almost came together, when there was almost little one between Mane, Firmino, Salah. I think we talked the end of last season about how you get that fourth threat in there. The Brighton game last time was with Solanke. You could do it the other way around and try and get someone like Shaqiri into the team. I think that if you look at, you rely on, if you're picking up that midfield three, you rely on Keita having his best game, I think, for him to really contribute in that final third as often as you'd like, which he did for spells against West Ham, for a long spell against West Ham. This was a quieter game for him. Don't think that helped Firmino. I think longer term in games like this, it would be nice if you were able to find a way for either Sturridge to help solve that problem, Shaqiri to help solve that problem. Perhaps you might want to look at, say, Wijnaldum playing further forward to try and solve that. But I think right now it's a tough place for him to be in, because you're still in that kind of very much a 4-3-3 at the minute, rather than having a one in there somewhere. And I think a one in there somewhere, whether that is Firmino himself at times, will help Firmino.
I think you can make the arguments with the way Keita played, which we haven't been able to make so far. But I always like John Gibbons' line of, we looked an attacker light. I think that's what Steve's saying there as well. That I think that we want Keita to be able to effectively flit between the two modes. But if he doesn't play particularly well in one of the modes, then it becomes quite difficult for him to flip between the two of them. And then if an opposition side's playing well, which Brighton did, and certainly in terms of stopping Liverpool, Brighton did, again, this idea of flicking a switch is much harder in a football match than you think. You do wonder whether or not we might see something that, as the season wears on at home in some of these games, so that if the opposition are going to come and do what they did to us there, if they're going to come and have that attitude, that we do something that's almost can be written down as 4-2-4 when you get right down to it.
I think the biggest issue with Keita was that, from me, he looked like he was knackered after 15 minutes. It was really noticeable how leggy he was, especially towards the later stage of the first half, which again probably comes down to him still obviously adjusting, and obviously no changes, and there was a shorter time between these games, wasn't there, after Monday night. Going back onto the trying to create things, I thought Salah's performance was absolutely brilliant. It's sort of a performance that I hadn't really seen that much of him in. That the determination to try and link up play was so noticeable. Drock coming, I think he almost, because of the change in the second half where Trent effectively becomes a centre midfielder, Milner moves out to the right, Salah becomes virtually a forward, and he is sort of operating that Firmino role in that he's dropping deep so often. And he absolutely works his nuts off as well, to be fair to him. Doesn't half track back. I think there's one moment in the second half where he dispossesses Basuma on Liverpool's penalty area. So he does a real good shift, and he obviously gets headlines for his goal, because it's a really well taken finish. But I thought his performance was something that I hadn't seen from him yet. And I know he is really good at linking up with the front three and stuff, and we saw that at times, but it didn't come off with Mane and Firmino, who had off days. But I quite like the way he linked up with the midfielders like Milner and Keita, and even Henderson when he came on. Really good performance.
It was more that Salah very first came through as a 19, 20-year-old, and people said the Egyptian Messi type thing, and you don't see much Messi in him. But then, and this overstating it to compare it in terms of quality, I think, in him doing that. But there was just a few times when he was coming on and just beating a man inside, not just with his elite pace, but just with a little bit of trickery as well, I think, and coming into that number 10 or number 9 role at times as well. I think you're right. It goes under the radar a little bit, almost because his goal just kind of, he's the goal scorer now. But I think if he can add some of that to his game, not least because the pace doesn't last forever. We've seen it for lots of reasons. At some point it can go. If you can become even more rounded, then that's amazing.
There's something in a lot of the huge positives of the performance, the things that you remember are really quite spectacular moments, Adam, in the game, and that's such a strange thing from a football match. You probably had 4 or 5 really moments that really grab you and that you will remember for a fair bit of time. First one was Wijnaldum carrying it on the volley, where he just sort of dribbles past 4 without the ball ever really touching the ground, and you're just watching this thinking that's astonishing football.
And it was a shame he was fouled at the end of it, really, because you want to see what happened next. You want to see what the...
I think he bore it, to be honest.
When I don't disagree. I think he does go down easy on it, but it is still a shame, because I think given all of the little, the juggling, kneeing it up, taking it past about 3 people, you just wanted him then to put it on the floor and find a brilliant pass and then walk off. Like, you just sort of be like, that's me, lad, see you later, thank you. Because it was just gorgeous, and a shame that we didn't get to see what had happened if the ball had dropped to the floor nicely and he just passed a little ball off to somebody else, lit a cigar and been happy with his day.
The next one on that grabbed me is all aspects of the goal, to be honest with you, Steve. That's what happens when Liverpool absolutely come alive. Milner snaps into that tackle, and it's almost like the ball's in the back of the net from the minute he's won the tackle. Firmino then just does the right thing, like the tackle begs it. And the finish is terrific. I mean, his finishing to me it's a source of wonder, to be honest with you. When in the second half, it was noticeable he was missing things high and wide, and so many of his best finishes, they don't even really invite the keeper to be involved. They don't really invite the brilliant save. They're often along the ground into a place where no one can reach it, and that was a classic of the genre.
I didn't expect him to score. It's difficult. Neil, you sat where I sit. The angle I've got makes that goal. I think whether it gives me a good view of it or a bad view of it, it made it look really, really hard to score from where he was scoring from, the way he was taking it, the point at which he was taking it. I turned away, and when people stand up in front of me, there's a little bit when you can't quite see the post, the near post at the Anfield Road end, and where the striker's standing, so you're not quite sure. You sort of you lose the ball a little bit. For a minute, I didn't think he'd scored. It was one of the goals when you sort of, it's the crowd that tells you before your eyes do, if that makes any sense. I think that the build up to it was sort of archetypal. A couple of years ago, Klopp goal, the thing that told you what this team was meant to be about was that hunger to hunt the ball down and then be quick in transition and the ball ends up in the back of the net. We probably score fewer of those now because we're just a better team, but I think those are the goals, and those are goals that will hurt big teams as well at times if you can catch them cold like that. I think the manager will quietly be really pleased with the nature of the goal.
Obviously Milner's crucial to that goal, but he's on Bissouma before the ball's even passed to Bissouma, which is obviously really good. But another thing that I liked about it was the way, sort of as Milner's approaching Bissouma, the way everyone else sort of swarms around that area. And I don't know if you've ever seen Liverpool, a training session in Liverpool, sometimes they do them on Facebook Live or whatever, but they do this drill where whenever the attacking players win the ball and they're clean through and they've got like 8 seconds to score and no defenders are allowed to challenge him. And I sort of think that's why the ball ends up in the net so quickly, because Milner gets it, it goes to Firmino and then Mane, and then it's Salah and it's in the back of the net within seconds. And that's what it is. It's a matter of practice that once they get the ball in these situations, they know exactly what to do. And I think that's just a perfect, sort of typical Jürgen Klopp Liverpool goal, I think.
Next one, which grabbed everybody, is the goalkeeper. Steve, the goalkeeper, it was an unbelievable, just to have seen him to have done it in his second home game the way in which he does, and he nearly gets punished for messing about later on, though I do think it is a foul, and it's classic refereeing of, well, you just did think their lad before, so I'm not going to stand for that. It's almost like it's cheating, but it was just a sight to behold, really, and I loved the response it got from the crowd, which can be referred to as mixed in the best possible way.
It was. It's a shame, because I thought it might be the moment that would sort of set the tone and get Liverpool right back on the front foot and score 2 or 3 goals, and you could go. Have you ever seen that from a goalkeeper, sort of catalysing a team like that? Didn't really work out that way. But I think what it did do was calm everyone down. The reaction for the later one was even more mixed, I would say. But I think it was much more muted than it would have been had he not just done the thing before. There's an awful lot of people who go the game who don't really read up much, and I'm in awe of them. I think they're great, because I think that this is literally the right way. There was a fella near me who didn't know who Naby Keita was against West Ham and was genuinely asking, who's this new lad? Looks good, doesn't he? And I was really pleased with that, and I think there's a lot of people, whereas we've read this is what Alisson does,
watched loads of YouTube.
We watched him do it a million times. He needs to demonstrate what he is and who he is, and we all know at one point it will result in him getting caught out. But you can see that he's got the confidence, and it's actually the best thing to do in that situation. Rather than kicking the ball straight out or panicking or trying to push it to one side and go around him that way, it's literally the right thing to do football-wise as well. I think it works, and it gave brightened the day up for a lot of us. I think. I think it set the tone for who he is, and almost all of the time he clears the ball fairly routinely, like a goalkeeper does and should. And I think that's the thing to remember. He's not a clown. He's not some performing seal. It's just something that he sometimes will do.
My favourite part of it was the chip is obviously really good, but then as Knockout turns around and everyone's worried that he's going to catch him from behind, but he just delicately knocks it off to Van Dijk, as if he knew. Everyone's panicking that he's going to get caught from behind, but he knows exactly where knockout is, and just calmly knocks it to Van Dijk, who didn't even want the ball. He wanted it to be played.
Yeah, Van Dijk wasn't that keen, was he?
But yeah, his distribution was really good. I know he nearly got caught out a few times, but there was a lovely outside of the boot ball in the first half, and then I think like a minute later he absolutely pings one to Alexander-Arnold, and just helps, doesn't it? Helps get Liverpool on the front foot.
That's what so much of it is, Adam. And that one to Alexander-Arnold, I think in the end Alexander-Arnold, he gets sort of a combination of tackled and miscontrols it, but the way in which he gets tackled / it miscontrols is it goes another 20 yards forward, and suddenly we're 70, 80 yards up the pitch, and we're scrapping for possession on the edge of their final third. And then if you do win it there, as we saw with the goal, I can't believe the extent to which the difference he can make in terms of making Liverpool look like a more attacking proposition. The fact that he can play a ball into a stride of a full back 60 yards away is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and you can see why Klopp did what we can now call, I suppose, failed experiment with Karius, because he was meant to be the ball playing goalkeeper. So you can see why Pep wanted it as well. You can see why these managers are keen on these goalkeepers who can play football. And it's a bit of a Yadar comment, but my fear is that opposition teams will be targeting him now. Like if I was Cloudwell going into the weekend, I'd be saying to Gray.
But I think that's what Klopp wants.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I wonder whether the problem is, in order to have this brilliant distribution and get on the front foot and all that stuff, he's going to be in situations where every now and again he might get caught out.
Yeah.
Now it is one of them, isn't it? You've got to weigh up which one you think matters more. The problem is, we could have dropped points yesterday. If he gets caught out in one of three positions he puts himself in that aren't totally necessary, then we maybe drop points in that game, and everyone's going, "Oh, we had a chance to catch it, and then we dropped it, and it was a little bit unnecessary." So, but you don't necessarily want to stamp that out of his game, because it's what makes it thrilling when he gets the ball to Trent, as you say, and then we're on the front foot. So it's from the manager's point of view a little bit of a catch-22.
But if you are Leicester now, Adam, you're Puel and you're looking at that, and what it might actually pull 2-3 of your players 20-30 yards higher at the pitch than you otherwise might have done in order to try and catch him out, at which point there's more space for Liverpool to play in. And that, I think that's what I think with Guardiola as well, with what City do, I think there is the idea of, with Valdez, going back when Valdez was doing it at Barcelona, I think there's the idea of, go on, try and catch us out, because we're in the act of you trying to catch us out, we think we create space to be able to do something else. But it is a high wire act, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but that's just it, isn't it? And that's why I think, it's why he's sort of single-handedly making his way through the season ticket waiting list, because he's clearing a load of people out. But it is the benefit that you get from it. It's the risk you take with it. But if I was Puel, maybe I'd be saying to like Gray, get on him. As soon as he's got you just peg it at him. You just absolutely launch yourself at him. Some managers will commit 2 or 3 further forwards. One might say, just put your fast lad and go at him.
I think on this, Steve, what I think we will need to be careful for is the double-edged goalkeeper sword with referees. Because as I say, I think the second time he does it, I think he is just quite clearly fouled. I don't think there's much of that. I'm surprised there will be much of a debate on it. But in exactly the same way that when their lad and Firmino clash, their goalkeeper and Firmino clash second half, like the rules of football. The rules of football are the goalkeeper gets that decision, and he shouldn't get that decision. But it's almost this is just what we do. But my worry is the flip side is that when it doesn't quite go right for him, there'll be loads of referees desperate to give the benefit of the doubt to someone else, because you don't do that sort of thing, mate.
I think there's certainly some referees will take against it a little bit sort of Suarez type. I'm keen to show that I am aligned with a certain worldview of football. I think there's something in that in referees. I think his overall, it's his confidence, and I think it's the fact that he can come away and go, well, if we fail to beat Brighton, because it won't be because I made a mistake in my goalkeeping, it'll be, let's look at the forwards, why we didn't score 2-3 goals against them. I think the manager will be happy with that state of affairs. I think he's been fortunate in terms of the chances, and this is down to the defence and him and the midfield and everyone. We've limited size to such poor chances. I think there were some stats going round about some of the expected goals type stuff is just like off the scale in terms of the quality of chances we've given up so far have been really, really, really low, and he's had a few routine-ish saves that he's made well. that have been perfect for him. Really, we've yet to see him make a sort of incredible save, but he'll feel really confident. He's got 3 clean sheets. He's just got that authority in and around his penalty area that Karius just didn't have. And I think if you're going to be that type of goalkeeper, a ball playing goalkeeper who takes your chances, you need to have, whether it's natural, whether it's coached, an air of authority. It may be something that Karius can develop. Something about Alisson's size, I think, helps as well. It just gives him that air of and the price tag, I guess. Just literally the air of, I'm here to do this and I'm going to do this. A little bit like Van Dijk. We've seen Van Dijk make mistakes. We've seen Van Dijk get caught out, and he doesn't care. He'll just carry on, and he shouldn't care.
I think what also drew really big cheers around Anfield was that I don't think when he came for the ball off a corner or a cross or whatever, he didn't lose it, or he didn't not catch it or do a bad punch once. He got everything, and from where I was sitting, it seemed every time this big yellow jersey came running out to come and get something, he would end up getting it, and that must be so reassuring for your players that I can see this big yellow thing coming and get it now. And
the yellow's good.
It is
good. Really, really.
So that was probably. I mean, it was a good performance on the whole, but I thought that was one of the standouts. But just commanding his area so well.
Alexander-Arnold's ball on the volley in the second half, the 70-yard pass was just Glenn. It was sumptuous, really, and Henderson just played a really good ball back into the same space, and it had come back out, and Henderson's ball was the right decision, but it was done with nowhere near the same, just the same technical loveliness that sort of. You almost heard it like it made the most beautiful sound you've heard in your whole life.
It was one of those balls where it's amazing because only he's the only person in the stadium that's seen Salah open and thought, I can get this ball to him. And the vision to do that, but the technique to pull it off as well, in the way that he just cuts under it and slices it to him, and it perfectly ends up on the foot of Salah. It's just scary that he's 19 and can do that, and have the confidence to do that as well, because you could have easily give the ball away there, and Liverpool were still on the attack, so the potential for a counter for Brighton to do that, but absolutely textbook execution.
Yeah, it's and I suppose again, he's not had his greatest 3 games, but you can just still see the quality there. And I think that's Liverpool as a whole. Keita's turn against Palace and the ball over the top is that's the thing that you take away and go, this is what this team can do. Whether the performances are entirely there just yet, not quite, but Liverpool in moments are looking an absolute level up from where they were last season, and an absolute level up from where Manchester City were last season in terms of individual quality. And we know that the collective is there. We know that will come together. I think that looking at being able to say all of that and to say that we've won 3 games and not conceded a goal is a great position to be in.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. Glenn, when he started talking, looked off into the distance with a dewy-eyed wonderment when he first mentioned the Trent pass, and it is that kind of gorgeous thing, isn't it? Where it just and the key thing, exactly as Glenn said, is he's 19 and he's doing things like that. That is so thrilling. That is so exciting. And obviously the manager, as Glenn was saying about having the confidence to do it, the manager deserves a huge amount of credit for breeding that into him, and giving that trust. I'm not going to mention any other specific managers, but not all managers in the Premier League will do that with young players. They won't give them the time of day. Under another manager, we might not have seen Trent up to now in anything other than League and FA Cup games. League Cup and FA Cup games. But instead, we've got one of the top right backs in the country, and he's only 19, and God knows where he's going to go from here.
Talking about another young player, I want to talk about Gomez, Glenn. He had more Glenn Murray than he got Benteke. Murray's form at the minute is what he did to Bailly and Lindelof. I'd say it was a good performance from both Murray and Gomez. To be honest with you, I think in general we'll come on and give Brighton some credit in a minute. But I thought that Murray really, you could see how he is a handful. The manager actually again referred to it afterwards, saying it was proper centre halving was almost what he was saying.
Yeah, and when Klopp was asked about this at his press conference, there was just a big smile before the answer, because it was he knew that was like 2 big tests that have been ticked off for Gomez now. And that we're going to use the word with this centre-half partnership, the word that comes up a lot is calmness, and I think that's exactly what you get with them. There's been 2 moments which I've really enjoyed, and they're nothing to do with his play, but I think in the Palace game, he has a bit of a mix-up with Alisson, and the ball goes out for a corner because Alisson retreats, and instead of bollocking the goalkeeper or getting flustered, he's just fine and just gets into a defensive position and goes there for the corner. And then in this game, there's a moment where Glenn Murray's literally got his arm on him and literally like greeting him, like you do with a mate, and put your arm around his shoulder. It's a definite foul. I don't even think it gets given, but there's absolutely no reaction from Gomez whatsoever, who's just totally locked in on winning this duel, which he did throughout the game, I felt. Really impressive. And again, we're going to come to age, but to do that at 21 in the Premier League against when you're being targeted, it's not easy. And again, Trent's another example. He's been targeted in the past, and they seem like characters that just seem to enjoy the fact that, oh, you think I can be targeted upon and you can get at me? Well, look at this. And I think he's doing that really well.
There's something about focus, Steve, that I think that's what Glenn's referring to there as well, when Murray's climbing on him. We remember the player who came through playing left back when he first arrived, and there was something incredibly focused about him, like, I am going to play the best possible game I can, nothing is going to stop me here. And that appears to have almost gone up another notch now that he's at centre half this time round. And it's interesting at the start of the season, as though he's thought to himself, this is the chance. I might not get this chance again at a club the size of Liverpool to play centre back, to start centre back, get the shirt and keep it.
Yeah, and it is. You've got the thing of Lovren coming back, which he could either be a real, be sort of on his back and make him feel like, well, what am I going to do? This guy's going to come back in from having got to a World Cup semi-final and final, and both of them, and come and take the shirt back. And I think that he has reacted in exactly the right way, which is to say, this is mine now. And I think that's literally, you've seen it with Alexander-Arnold, as Adam said. I think we probably, under a lot of managers, would have seen him play last season a lot. Under a lot of managers, there would have been a huge temptation for clients to come back in, because you look safety first. Some of that's down to the manager, some of that's down to the environment around the club, and the fact that Klopp knows he's completely comfortable in his role. He's not, after 6 games, going to be having people going, "Oh, is he under threat?" kind of thing. I think the club, everyone around the club at the minute is creating an atmosphere that really is helpful to these footballers. Van Dijk has been brilliant, I think, alongside Gomez. Against West Ham, it felt like times he was talking him through it, less so again. I think in the last 2 games, it feels like Gomez himself has been just performing as Gomez knows he can. I think that's great. I really like the thing of a right-sided player having to play left back. I thought when Glenn Johnson did it, he focused, and I think it is something that maybe that carries through a little bit. Now he's moving into a different position again to reapply that. This is a position he's played through age group football, but it's not a position he's played massively as a professional. Now he's getting a chance to do it, and he looks absolutely born to it.
He does look born to it, and I think that it's going to be tough for Lovren to get the regular shirt back. You certainly feel, Adam, as though there's a gulf now between Matip and Gomez, which, I suspect if you'd have asked the manager to write his team down, given the day after the World Cup final, say, for the first game of the season, I think he would have had Matip in there. Right now, it looks really, really difficult to see a way back for him on a regular basis. Yes, there'll be a lot of games, but it shows the level of the performances that Gomez has put in against, I would say, 3, if not 3 very good sides, 3 arguably quite different, but very good at what they do centre forwards in Arnautovic, Benteke, and now Murray.
Yeah, it's challenges, isn't it? It's about the challenges that he's faced, and it is 3 different takes on a 3 different takes on a similar challenge. Yeah. I would say, of sort of the big fella,
variations on a specific theme.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's not,
the mad big fella, the big fella, and the old big fella.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like, it would have been interesting. We didn't have to see much of him against Chicharito, for example, with in the West Ham game, which would have been a different challenge again, because he's fast and pacey and sneaky and all of those sorts of things, getting in behind you and all those things. So it'll be interesting to see how he coaches with that. But it's fascinating to see because obviously when he first came through and he was getting games at left back and right back, everyone was saying he's a centre back, he's earmarked for centre back, and then you'd see him like switch off when a simple ball was coming in, and it'd go over it, he'd be caught under it when he really shouldn't have been, and things, and you'd sort of think, how's he going to cope with that at centre back then, when those sorts of things are coming in on a regular basis? And but fair enough that he's absolutely dealt with everything that's been thrown at him so far this season, and come out of it with everybody talking about him in the best possible way. And whatever you might want to say about Matip, and there are people that do like him, he didn't come out of every game that he played with people talking about him for the right reasons necessarily. There were often times when there'd be conversations about him looking a bit gangly or looking a bit dodgy or not being as good on the ball as we thought he would be. Or there was always question marks, I would say, from the majority of people around Matic, whether not at the moment, about Gomez at centre-back. And for Lovren, it's the same sort of thing. There's enough... There is enough of a body of evidence of him making mistakes or silly decisions or having daft moments for plenty of people to not be overly desperate for him to come back into the team if Gomez continues to play the way he is. But that, to be honest, that's about as good as we could possibly ask for, because I for one, I was one of those people banging the drum of us needing to buy a centre-half in the summer, because I'm concerned about the overall reliability of all of the centre-halves that we have available to us, in terms of they often miss one or two games because of an illness or a virus or a tweak or whatever. So having Gomez stepping up to the plate and saying, this is my position, until I do something wrong, I'm not leaving the centre-back position, is great, because that then just means that we've got the actual genuine talent in the team to mean that we can take a bit of a breather and not rush someone back in like Lovren when he gets over whatever injury this is. We don't have to rush him back in now, which we may have had to do in the past, and he's suffered because of it. So it's a positive place to be, I think.
Steve, Brighton deserve credit in that they play the game well. It's a Brighton side that's not dissimilar in any way, really, from the one that conceded 9 goals to Liverpool last season across 2 games. And I think that if anything, that almost helps Chris Hughton in that he's able to say, lads, you conceded 9 to these last season. Let's really knuckle down. Let's really focus. But let's also maybe be even a bit more defensive than we would normally be. It was a different Brighton side, given the fact that they didn't play the most creative player in Pascal Gross. They played him against Man United. They don't play him against Liverpool, which I think tells a certain story. And I don't think it is as straightforward as home and away. I think through the season, I think that a tone's been set now with the coverage of the way Newcastle approached matters against Chelsea at home. But I do think that for a few of these sides, there is such a thing here as we just don't want to get battered. Mm-hmm. That getting battered it's not just the idea of what it does to the goal difference, but that could be a factor for all these sides. But there's also what it does to the morale of the group, to the idea that, you've got to be able to pick these lads up in 2 days' time. You've got to be able to say to them, you can go and play the next game.
I think everybody is looking at the league at the minute, and if they've got any sense, they'll be thinking Huddersfield and Cardiff do not look like they belong in this company. And I think that more so than perhaps you've seen for a long time, this could be about one other team going down. And I could be proved completely wrong by Cardiff going on a really good run, and certainly got a canny enough manager, or Huddersfield. I think Huddersfield, it looks increasingly hard for them to see just where the goals come from, and this is no reflection on them. They've massively overachieved, and sometimes if you massively overachieve, then unless you can really kick on and really spend massively, which probably would be the wrong approach for them anyway, this might just be a thing that might have to happen. But I think if you're Brighton, you're looking at that and you're going, well, we don't want to become a side that maybe loses 8 of our first 10. And I think that going to Liverpool, there's nothing to be gained by a sort of buccaneering approach. That they can come to Anfield and might get something, but if they don't, they won't get an absolute hiding. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. If you were setting a course to try and finish somewhere in the sort of mid-table, or even upper mid-table, they could have those aspirations. I don't think they played sort of completely negative football. I think there weren't really many options for them that Liverpool allowed them. I think it's a good point about the 9 goals last season, and really thought about it, the extent to which last season, Liverpool, and in both of those games, Liverpool had that fourth threat, which was Solanke in the second game, Coutinho in the first. And it was probably Coutinho's one of his best games for Liverpool. It was ridiculous, the extent to which he just ran that, particularly in the second half away from home. I mean, it's easy to remember the away game when he plays the mad back 3 with Chan and Wijnaldum in it. It was a very different game to that, I think, and it wasn't. It's interesting, I suppose, that previously both times Klopp saw Brighton as a team to change his setup for, look and try and do something different against. Whereas this time he was, I think, happy to kind of go again with the same thing, which maybe meant that Brighton didn't get beaten as heavily as Brighton might have got, but perhaps that he's got his system and his setup, and it was about where the game came in the season more than about the opposition.
It's going to be a season where we're going to get a lot of this, both home and away, Glenn. I think, I think that Newcastle have laid a certain mark there against Chelsea. I wouldn't be expecting them to do much different when we go there. I don't think they're going to be alone in this. I think there is such a thing as the second goal in these games. I think I think there's about 4 or 5 Liverpool players for whom the game becomes a lot easier. A game like that becomes a lot easier when you're 2-0 up. I think whoever plays, I think certainly possibly 2 of the midfield 3 can suddenly play with a lot more freedom when you go 2 ahead. I think that, it helps the fullbacks make some decisions for themselves in terms of where they want to be, because you obviously don't want to allow the door to be open. And even with as much as Liverpool do swashbuckle, there's a responsibility on these footballers. They know what the overall task is. So I think that, this season we might be spending a lot of time either talking about frustrating 1-0s where we don't quite feel as though we properly got going, or talking about the importance of that second goal at the time that it came. And I think that, you can't begrudge, I think it'd be wrong to begrudge Brighton their approach, Newcastle's their approach against Chelsea. A list of these sides are going to approach these games a certain way, and we're just going to have to accept it.
Yeah, and I know it's a massive cliche, but goals really do change games, especially like second ones, and when you get a decent margin. To be honest, in the first 2 Liverpool games, that's one of the things that's impressed me, is the sheer hunger and desire to not rest on their laurels. If you look at the West Ham game, they score right before half-time. In that West Ham game again, Sturridge scores like right near the end. Crystal Palace, they score right before half-time. These are really crucial goals, and obviously score the late ones. And it's that just... How many times have we watched Liverpool in the past and Rude not getting that second goal? And it was the Brighton game was very nearly a case in point, because Knockaert has that really good chance just after half-time where he probably should score. And that's the only real chance that Brighton get. And we'll be talking about how typical Liverpool not getting that second goal. But I think they're proving it now that they are really hungry to obviously the main objective to win the league and all that, but they're really hungry to make games a lot easier for themselves. And when I first started covering Liverpool, and my first full season was the 16-17, and it felt like every game, and I know there was some thrashings in that, but it felt like every game was like a hard slog, and Liverpool were giving everything to try and get a result now. And I think as evolution's gone on, I think they're trying to make games easier for themselves, and they certainly did that at West Ham and then Crystal Palace to a certain extent.
Easier to do that individually if you've got not a settled team, but a settled squad, and nobody who feels like they're playing for their place in quite the same way, and like having to put everything in, to sort of massively impress the manager. Even players like Wijnaldum, who I think some of us thought might play fewer games. Well, he's shown his faith in him now, so that Wijnaldum doesn't have to. Wijnaldum probably can after the international break, where the manager to decide that he's going to do it, accept a 4-game spell out of the team, because you can see that there's the path back in. It does feel like Liverpool, you can only play through the gears if everybody in there is sort of content with their position in the side and in the squad, and it feels like a generally pretty happy, content camp at the minute.
It seems like to me like the sort of thing that, I've often been a little bit jealous of what happens in Spanish football for Real Madrid and Barcelona, that they do appear to get, from the outside looking in, easier games. And what I mean by that isn't a conversation about standards, but a conversation around, there's a lot of games where you get the impression everyone's settled for the outcome on 60. And I think that this one against Brighton was a good example of one where that wasn't the case. The one against Palace was a good example of one that wasn't the case. But if Liverpool had made it 2-0 on the hour against Brighton, you get the impression there would have been a fair bit of, we're all shaking hands and going home now, lads, knocking on around the whole ground. And, that we can lament the idea that we're going to come up against a lot of park buses, but the other side of that is, what that means is there's not going to be many buses trying to drive through the middle of us. That if you can solve the problem of how you get the second goal, you can solve the problem of how, for instance, you're able to take it relatively easy in that in that weekend fixture between 2 midweek games.
Yeah, and I think teams with us and City, the teams will know that a hiding is more than possible if they don't really work very, very hard. The interesting thing is going to be how many managers are able to get their players working really, really hard for a loss. Like, that's a really difficult sell. Like, we're going to lose this, but you need to work your socks off to lose by less goals than other teams might lose it by. So that'll be interesting to see how many teams have got it, and how many teams have got the ability to do it, because not every team will have the ability to put the shift in.
Not everyone's got Davy Proper and Dale Stevens sentiment.
Exactly, yeah. So, they're just not... A lot of teams won't have that ability to really, really work hard to keep us down. But it's obviously a lot more exciting than a couple of seasons ago, where you felt like teams turned up at Anfield knowing they would be able to get something out of it because they could just wait for a mistake at the back, or they could wait for the goalkeeper to do something mad, or they could wait for whatever. The more results we get where it's 3-4 whatever nil, the more that teams will turn up and just be like, let's just get out of here as quickly as we can without getting too battered. And as you say, that's where the second goal will come in handy. And I thought that I couldn't get to the game for personal reasons, and I was watching it on Sky on BT, and they made the point that it's when Liverpool go 2-0 up that's when teams start to concede 3 or 4 because they're not in the game anymore, and they know they're not going to get back. They're not going to score 2 against us. They're probably not going to score 1 against us. So that's when it goes to 3 or 4, and it does make that 2 really, really important in order to get that comfort of being like, right, we're 2-0 up. There's half an hour to go. They've settled on it. We'll just play nice football. Maybe we get 3. Maybe we get 4 if we do something like Sturridge's goal after 30 seconds on the pitch or whatever it is, but not, but everybody's quite happy to sort of go, that'll do. You've got the second, fine. Don't kill us, please.
In the context of all this, United Spurs play tonight, Steve. City drop points. Chelsea, Arsenal both got wins. Arsenal from a losing position. It's worth pointing that out, I'd say. But City drop points, and I think that was the boost of the weekend. Really, you and I actually watched it together, and it was we watched the last half an hour together, and it would be fair to describe us as involved in it. It was intriguing the way Wolves did do well against them, in that they had the nous, even at 1-0, even at 1-1, to still carry a threat. That you still got the impression they just carried a threat. And I don't know if that kept City honest. I mean, they did hit the woodwork 3 times. They played some good stuff through the game. You said to me, City will deserve to win 36 of the 38 games they play this season in all likelihood on balance of play. So, you need to be a bit lucky. But what I thought Wolves did well was they gave themselves the ability to be a bit lucky. And that's maybe what we need some teams to do against City.
Yeah, to take that, I mean, in something as simple as the substitution to bring on Traore at the point that he does, Traore, by no means a consistent footballer, but someone with pace and quality that can hurt teams. Someone who has previously been considered by teams of the likes, of the sort of the standard of Man City. He was considered at one point that he could reach that level, and maybe still will. I thought he did really well when he came on. Actually, they looked similarly rusty to us, I suppose. You saw Sane's performance, which was one of the worst I've seen for a long time. It was up there with Mane. Nothing went right for him.
Yeah.
Aguero looked excellent, but elsewhere you felt like they missed De Bruyne. Silva at times, I think, I'm wondering and hoping he might become a little bit of a problem for them if at some point he has to go. At some point his quality has to dip a little bit, and it sometimes takes you a while to work that out while someone's still playing in your team all the time. They look similar to us, I think, in that they're still capable of looking really, really good at the minute. They are a little bit rusty. We're a little bit rusty. They've dropped some points and we haven't, and that's a great position to be in. Wolves, it was their best performance. I've seen all of the first game they played and most of the second one. I think.
See the curious amount of Wolves. It happens sometimes that way, doesn't it?
They played really well in little pockets. They were happy to get the ball forward quite quickly and then try and work things from there rather than inviting City onto them by playing around too much at the back. You saw the experience of Moutinho kicking in, him and Neves forming an interesting partnership in midfield, and I think they've got a fair bit to look forward to. The hope for us is that they can start taking points off more regularly off sides who we need them to take points off, and the more sides that can do that, the better. And they might be freed up a little bit by the fact that if it does look like there's 2 sides that get cut adrift fairly quickly, that might start happening a little bit more as well, while they're still quite scared of coming to Liverpool and probably Man City, and that would be ideal for me.
Glenn, we can see what we need, and we're going to keep talking about it whilst we're in the ability to talk about it. It is worth pointing out to anyone who's listening, Manchester City's first difficult game of the season, on paper at least, after the Arsenal one, is when they next come to Anfield on October the 6th. And it is worth pointing out, I'd say, that between now and then we've got to go to Leicester, we've got to go to Tottenham, and we've got to go to Chelsea. We've got those 3 away games to come in this little run here. And I think what's massive is we need that game on October the 6th for us to be as close, I mean ideally ahead of, but as close as Manchester City as possible. We need it to be a proper 6-pointer, but where even if we lose the 6-pointer, it doesn't feel like a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, and I'm sure, To be honest, that Wolves game, I watched it. I thought Wolves defended for their lives really well. There was some last-ditch tackling, and Man City were a really, really bad day for them, even though they had a few chances to win it as well. But that game, Liverpool City, I think one of the best things that came out of the All or Nothing documentary was that sort of, one, there's the bit they left in about them not meeting the valuation for Van Dijk, which I thought was a bit weird because there was no mention of Mahrez in that transfer while they were talking about that. And then the other bit is when Guardiola's scratching his head at how to deal with Mane and Firmino and Salah and all that. And just those that doubt in the back of your mind, even for Pep Guardiola, may be a bit of a benefit to Liverpool going for that game. But it's the benefit of Liverpool winning these first 3 games and possibly potentially getting 12 out of 12 points is that it's not a disaster. I know points, dropping points should be a rare occurrence, but it's not a disaster if Liverpool draw at Tottenham, whereas they got beat 4-1 last time, and Chelsea, they got beat there at Stamford Bridge. So that's the benefit. Liverpool have won the games they're meant to win. So anything else is really a bonus, isn't it, considering the form of last season.
Excellent stuff. All right, it's been a pleasure. The Anfield Wrap this week in association with RedsBet. Thank you very much to Steve, to Glenn, and to Adam. Any other business? Anyone want to praise anyone? Anyone's man of the match?
Do you know, I was saying to Glenn before, something really interesting about when you don't go the game is you don't get to see the off-the-ball work. So I was looking through Twitter and people raving about James Milner, and having watched it on telly, the tackle for the goal was pretty much the only one that he did successfully. He could have got 2 or 3 yellow cards that game because he was just booting lads left, right and centre in that James Milner way that he does things. And I was saying, I thought he had a poor game. And I had loads of people come back to me and say, no, he didn't. He was brilliant. His off-the-ball work was amazing. His running was amazing. His passing, all of those things. And it isn't any other business point rather than a match-specific point. It just made me realise how absolutely mad it is when people get so entrenched in their positions on opinions on players that you can have 2 people watch exactly the same game and come away with a completely different opinion about it. Maybe means that we're not all absolutely right in the way we hate certain players.
We're not all on top of some necessary details.
I've just got ref watch for me. I thought that tackle on Milner in the second half was a bad one.
Yeah, it was a red, I think.
Yeah. And I realised that Lee Probert is still around on the Premier League circuit this weekend. He refed Bournemouth-Everton.
What I've discovered is that Manchester's second biggest export industry after the chop is refereeing. That they appear to, I think all Mancunian schools, you get your A-levels and you get your referee's qualification now. Something's gone on. I don't know what it is, but they've worked hard on it. Steve, any other business?
We talked about Wijnaldum enough. I thought he was really, really good. I think we talked about quality, sometimes not just displacing players, but also perhaps making them better. Just in and around the place, having other good players around. I think that's really lifted his performance. Milner too. I thought was good generally, and without being a sort of standout performance. And Van Dijk, I think it's underestimated the extent to which not having to worry about it is great. Just a player in a position you just do not have to worry about is brilliant.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much to Glenn, to Steve, and to Adam. It's been the Anfield Wrap in association with RedsBet. See you soon.